Hello, it is Rebecca Ryan-King, speech pathologist, and forward and backward chaining is something I think every speech pathologist needs to at least know about because it is a really great way to help children who have difficulty saying consonant clusters. So what I want to do is I want to go through quickly what forward chaining is and then what backward chaining is, and maybe give you a heads up on when I would use forward chaining over backward chaining to help a child say their consonant clusters. Now, the idea of chaining in a really simple way that I like to think about forward and backward chaining is that it can break down something that is hard, which is a consonant cluster, putting two consonant sounds at the start. We can take that complexity and just make it simpler for a child and then build it back up so that it's easier for them to say. So a really great way that I like to teach forward chaining is to use visuals. The same with backward chaining because it gives the child a visual representation of what we want them to say. I'm going to hold up a visual first of forward chaining. So for me, and when I use forward chaining, I would usually isolate that first sound, that initial sound. So in this idea here, the snake represents the S sound, and then when you join it onto the next picture, which is low, slow, what it does is it helps the child say this word slow in a way that's easier for them, because often a child might look at this and they might say low or they might say slow. So that is a really quick example of forward chaining. Backwards chaining is when you would start with the last part. Now, if this was a multisyllabic word, you'd start with the last syllable, but we're talking about clusters here. So I would be doing the last part of the cluster. So really it's deleting the first sound. So in the same example of slow, backward chaining might be something like low, 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 and you get on a roll, and then you might put that sound on at the start, slow, and it will help you out. So when would you use forward chaining and when would you use backward chaining? Usually I would be using forward chaining when the child is deleting or omitting that first sound in a consonant cluster. So if they look at slow and if they say low and lice, and if they say leak for sleek and lied for slide, usually I try forward chaining because I know that the child can say this part. They're acknowledging, they know that there's the L there and they're saying that part of the word. It's just the first sound that they're deleting or omitting. So I really just like to work with the child and make sure that they know that every time they see that snake, that's when they have to do s or the sound. And this works for all other clusters as well. I'll have an image or a visual that represents that first sound. And often when I'm first introducing this, we are just going down and I'm reminding the child, every time you see this, that's what's the sound we have to say, so that they know and they start to use this as their own cue. Every time I see the snake, I say S. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is there is some long air. This was really purposeful because sometimes I find that when people use forward chaining, they will model it or say it to the child and they'll have a really big gap. So it will sound like this, low. And then sometimes I've found that children who learn this from another speech pathologist, that's how they approach all clusters. And they've learned that they say the first sound in isolation and then they say low. So when I do use forward chaining, I'm really aware and I like to use my finger here to really say we have to make that sound long. Use your finger, make that sound long. It's going to join on to the next word. Slow. And often I will cover this up because I tell the child we're going to trick our brain into how to say these words easier. And once they get that, it's very easy for us to go down this word list here. And if they forget and omit that first sound, we go back and go, oh, let's make it easy for us. Remember, slow starts with that snake sound. So that's a really good example of when I would use forward chaining. Now, I will typically use backward chaining when it is the second part of the consonant that is challenging for a child. So let's say the child is looking at slow and they might say so they're deleting that all sound. Or they might look at slow. This is a really good example for the L clusters. And they might say SWO. So now they're using a W. So this is a great example of when backward chaining can be helpful because you're focusing on this little chunk that is hard for them, that they're missing. It's like they know that it starts with S, but it's the next sound that's tricky. So this is where we might, for multiple examples here, say low, 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 and I might have to help them with their tongue if we need to, and then I say now you just have to put the snake sound on at the start of that. Now, what I will say, if this visual is too hard for a child, I can still use, and I often have used, the forward chaining visual. I might just start here first though. I might say to the child, you are so good at saying that long snaky sound or that long S sound at the start of it. This part though, this really tricks you. Let's practice this. Low. Can I hear you say it? Low. Love that. Let's go back. Slow, slow. And then we start with that last chunk, the backwards bit, the last part, and then we add the S sound on there. Now, as quickly as I can, I do like to move to words. For me, forward chaining and backward chaining is a stepping stone. It's a stepping stone to helping a child say a consonant cluster. As quickly as I can, I like to remove those visuals and I like to go straight to words. But it's always just helpful to have these sheets to help my kids, especially when they are deleting those sounds, because we are representing and we are breaking down this complex cluster for that child and showing them smaller, easier to say chunks to help them say their consonant clusters more easily. So if you have a child who has difficulty with S clusters, L clusters, and R clusters, just know that these forward and backward chaining sheets is something that we have in Adventures in Speech Pathology store. We just have really nice flashcards and we've got forward and backward chaining examples. So no matter which type of chaining is going to be effective for your child, you know that you've got 2 options to try, and flashcards with little cues on the top if you need that extra little stepping stone for that child, so that you can then go on to other approaches. So you might think to yourself, I'd love to do cycles approach, or I really want to do complexity approach or minimal pairs with my child, but they can't say the cluster. This might be your starting place, and then it will help you, once the child has the skills to say those clusters, it can help you then move on to those other phonological approaches that you really would like to use for your child. So if this video helped, if it helped clarify, please give it a like and consider subscribing so that we can continue to deliver more tips and tricks to help speech pathologists and students treat speech sound disorders more confidently.